Hello, this is Dr. Helen Webberley. Welcome to our GenderGP podcast, where we will be discussing some of the issues affecting the trans and non-binary community in the world today, together with my co-host, Marianne Oakes, a trans woman herself, and our head of Therapies.
Sadly, for the listener, you're going to have me hosting it today, and not the usual Helen Webberley. But we've got a wonderful guest who is Amy Walters, who's one of the Wellbeing team that I have the privilege to manage. And we're just going to talk about general mental health today at this time, just to see, I don't know, what advice or coping mechanisms we may be able to develop as the conversation goes. I don't know how you feel about that, Amy, but what I was going to say is, do you want to just introduce yourself quickly and then we'll get going?
I noticed that you said quickly there because we do tend to talk for a long time. I'm Amy. Thank you so much for inviting me on the podcast. It's lovely to be here. I really could talk for forever, so you might have to stop me. I'm one of the counsellors on the Wellbeing team. I get the privilege of doing the information gathering sessions and follow-up sessions and run individual counselling sessions as well. I absolutely love it. I love what we do at GenderGP, and it's great to be part of the team. So that's kind of the briefest of introductions that I can give you.
Just while you were talking there, Amy, it was going through my mind, because it's unstructured, this conversation, and I think sometimes being counsellors, people assume that we've got everything sorted, and I think people sometimes forget that we've got lives and we've got our own set of issues to deal with, and counselling is what we do as a profession. But I think where we are fortunate is that we, certainly the Wellbeing team at GenderGP, I don't know about others, but the Wellbeing team, when we are feeling a bit down, we do contact each other, don't we? And like you say, we now and then we just have conversations, and we're able to look after ourselves. And I just wonder how valuable that would be in other people's lives, not necessarily to have a counsellor, but feeling a bit down, who can I talk to? Who will listen, and who will take on board what I just need to externalise?
I think that's a really good point. And I think when I was thinking about well-being, just before coming on to talk about, how we look after ourselves in times such as these, depending on when you're listening to this, I can almost guarantee there'll be something going on in the world globally or in our lives personally that is difficult. Well-being, mental health, all of that kind of stuff, it's so individual. And I could sit here and list off, my love of cactuses, which makes me feel happy and, is part of my well-being. But it is so individual. So I think the first step has to be knowing what you need and knowing yourself well enough to know what you want. So if you're in a place where you're feeling low and struggling with whatever it is, you need to know whether, do you need to talk to someone? Is that something that is going to bring you back up again? Do you need a bath and a book? Do you need a duvet day? Do you need nice food, good TV? I don't know. So it almost sort of has to start with what do you think you need, and that sort of starts with that connection with yourself first and foremost.
I think in these times of lockdown, interestingly enough, people are thrown together. One of the things I'm conscious of, I work from home, Vicky works from home, we're always together. One of the things I did was build this therapy room, not because I needed a therapy room. I needed somewhere separate. It's literally 4 yards from my front door, but I needed that little bit of separation. And I think understanding our needs as an individual is really important. I think that links into what you were saying. What does make you feel good? What are the things that I can do to feel better? And I think it comes in the context of the environment that we're living in as well. What can I actually do? Yeah,
absolutely. Sometimes you're going to be really limited as to what you can do. I live in a rental house, so I can't build anything, and I guess that kind of sort of leads into that sense that actually no one else can tell you. They can make suggestions, but so for example, I find it really irritating when, if I'm feeling a bit stressed or anxious or rubbish, someone says, why don't you try meditation? Well, I hate meditation. I can't, it's like really rubbish at it. So it's one of those things where, like I say, you could look at lists of, things you can do to look after yourself. But it really is starts with what do you think you need? And sometimes that can be a really hard question to answer. How do I know what I need?
Well, the other side of it is, you mentioned it earlier as well, is understanding yourself. At the risk of sounding like I'm selling counselling here, part of counselling is helping people to understand themselves and understand their own needs, but also to trust themselves.
Yeah.
And it's very easy. I don't know about you, but I get very irritated by people that just think positive affirmation will make everything okay. Just because 100%. We say something will happen doesn't mean it will. And I think sometimes it's okay to be down.
Yes.
That it's a perfectly valid, natural feeling to not feel great. What we decide to do about that and what that's telling us is really important. And I think, we shouldn't be happy at this time of lockdown. It's a worrying time. We've got family to worry about, and we're going to get tired and we're going to become exhausted. So, you mentioned duvet day before. I highly recommend a duvet day now and then, and be forgiving of ourselves just because we're not necessarily happy.
I'm a bit of an existentialist at heart, so I'm quite sort of well versed or familiar with the idea that actually, we create our own meaning, and the embracing the shadow is really important. That's been the biggest sort of thing that I've done in my life that has allowed me freedom. This understanding that actually happiness doesn't exist, or at least a reframing of happiness means that it has to contain parts of anger and sorrow and rage and jealousy. If you shut yourself off from one emotion, then you might as well shut yourself off from all of them. So I think counselling can really help perhaps challenge or break down some of these ideas that we've learned over the years of, and I mean, we could go down a rabbit hole of familial family scripts, the things that we get told about, just, stop crying, just, cheer up. Or, those things that our parents might have said to us that, mean that we have a relationship with having to make other people happy, because that's what we were told, that's how we felt love, because we were making other people happy and that kind of thing. So counselling's really good for unpacking that kind of stuff, and being able to learn how to embrace everything has a shadow. And the other thing that I kind of learned early on in my counselling journey was that this sense that actually everything's a wheel. Everything will change. Everything has to change. Nothing can really stay the same. So whilst you might be at the bottom of the wheel at this point in time, it has to go round again, and you will be at the top of it at some point. So that sort of verges on, just I guess in a way just telling people to hang in there, because sometimes that's all you can really do is hang in there, hold on, and wait for the bit to come round again that's going to be okay.
There's two things that I've kind of learned that appear to be true. I'm happy to be told that they're not, but if we're super anxious or we're really depressed, that they are only ever temporary states. That we, the human way of being means that we're striving all the time to move away from them negative states. But I think certainly when you're in the depth of depression or in the height of anxiety, everything feels like forever. And it's really important to understand that, a bit like you said with the wheel, it's never forever. It will pass, and having faith that it will pass. But when you're there, I suppose the worst thing and this is me personally, I don't know about everybody else, I'm not big for sympathy. I don't want sympathy. Empathy is what I need. And if I say to somebody, if somebody said to me, how are you feeling? And I say, I feel really shit. I want them to just respond sometimes, say, yeah, it is, isn't it? I can understand why you would feel like that.
Yeah.
Without, that must be terrible for you. Because ultimately something's making me feel like that. And maybe it's something I can't affect. Maybe it's something out of my control. So I just have to sit with it and trust that it will pass. And the people around me need to trust that it will pass.
And it can be so hard. I mean, it's so easy for us to sit here and say these words, but it's so hard when you're in the middle of that to feel like it will ever change. And so really learning how to look after yourself in those moments is so important and different for everybody. It's mental health and well-being is a really complex thing.
Yeah. I think the other thing that I've been conscious of more recently is, certainly as a trans woman living in the world, it's very easy for me to absorb all the negativity, particularly on social media. I'm not going to sit here and say that everybody's living in an environment like I am. I'm really lucky that the people around me are supportive and accepting, and not everybody's in that place. But what I would say is that one of the things, really difficult during lockdown here, but it's really important to find our spaces where we can let go for a little while. People we can talk to, where gender's not going to be the centre of every conversation. The politics around gender, the things that are being said on social media, it's really important to be able to just find our place where everything's normalised and that it's not everything's a debate or a conversation. And the one thing I've learned, them spaces do exist. We have to seek them out. We've got to want to seek them out as well. Don't let the hands of negativity grab our ankles and keep dragging us back. Because if we want to go out and fight the fight, we've also got to give ourselves the space to refuel and build our emotional strength back up to then to continue the fight. Just when we find we're surrounded with negativity, it's to seek out somewhere, and I'm not going to say positivity, but seek out the places where we can relax, where we can let go for a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And anybody that sort of takes on an activist role, which sometimes many gender diverse people are kind of forced into because it's their existence that is on the line. It can be exhausting, and it can almost distort your view of the world and people in a way, because when you're constantly surrounded by that, and there's absolutely every need to be for people to be fighting. When you're constantly sort of surrounded by it, you kind of think, well, that the whole world is full of people that are out to get me and that are arguing my existence, and there's it can really bring you down. So being able to take a break from it is so important, and allow yourself to do that, because sometimes I think you can get caught up in, well, if I'm not out there doing it and fighting and being in those spaces that are really quite toxic and difficult, who's going to be doing it? But you are allowed to take a break and refuel, and I'm sure everybody's heard of the sort of filling your own cup, so that you have things to give to people, sharpening your axe, whatever the metaphor is. It has to be part of your activism, looking after yourself. And again, that can look different for everybody. Maybe it's a podcast, maybe it's just a relaxing evening, or a space, like you say, seeking out a space to be refueled.
Yeah, I think that's. I use the just following on from what you were saying there. I use the the oxygen masks on a plane as an
Yes.
example.
Yeah.
You can't help anybody else if you don't help yourself first. The trouble that we live in a society that teaches us about selfishness. And the reality is that, it's all about context. And sometimes we've got to look after ourselves first. We can't look after others if we haven't looked after ourselves. And I think that's the one thing I would say I've learned as a counsellor, because I don't know, what do they call it? Compassion fatigue. That's quite high in counsellors when they don't look after themselves, because we can't offer compassion if we're not fueled, if we've not looked after ourselves. We cannot go and sit with people if we don't look after ourselves. And not that everybody's got to go to the lengths we go to. We actively seek out, or people actively seek us out, to be able to offload all what's going on for them, and we walk into there willingly. So we have a network around us.
Yes.
So not everybody's going to have that, but the principles are still the same. Because I cannot sit with a client who is severely depressed talking about suicide if I'm fragile. And again, we are human, and we've got a whole network of things around us that we can call on. Not everybody's going to have that, but it doesn't mean to say there isn't a network there if they seek it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And we as counsellors are here for people that are struggling with not having that network. I think that's really important. And we're not perfect as counsellors. We've not got it all sorted. We are, we're still processing our own stuff and traumas and learnt behaviours and relationships. But what we did learn in our counselling training is how to have boundaries, and how to protect our empathy, and how to use the people around us to sort of help with that. And not everybody, that's not sort of standard teaching. But I was wondering when you were talking then about how useful it will be for some people to sort of think about their inner child. So when we talk about looking after ourselves, like, my inner child's quite silly, and she likes cactuses, and sometimes she needs a good hug, and sometimes she needs to just walk barefoot out in the grass for a little bit. Sometimes, if we don't know where to start with how to take care of ourselves, it can be quite useful to sort of think about, well, okay, if the little 6-year-old in me, what would she need? What does she need right now? And if there's no one around us to give us a hug, we can hug ourselves. Touch is really quite important sometimes, and so we can release those chemicals by just kind of hugging ourselves and holding ourselves. So I don't know if that's a useful kind of starting point for what that might look like. It's not going to be easy for everybody. Sometimes there's connotations with our younger selves and what we've been through that aren't easy to access, but it could be a starting point.
I like the inner child as well, and leads me quite nicely onto the hypnotherapy, because I had an experience while I was training recently with hypnotherapy, where I got in touch with my inner child. And I'm the biggest cynic of all of this kind of thing, but I found it really profound, and the place it took me to was quite a traumatic experience. It was my first day of primary school. Can you believe it was quite traumatic?
Yeah,
and it had a negative effect on the rest of my education.
Yeah.
And I just went back there and hugged the child, just to reassure it that actually it'll be okay. That could tear up now thinking about it. But the truth of the matter is, I think as adults we close ourselves off if we're not careful.
Yeah.
And to be a little bit silly, to allow ourselves to play, even if it's with ourselves, whether it's doing a little bit of art or, and not it having to be perfect, and not fearing the judgment of others. I think that's really, because that's what children do. Children live the life without fear of judgment.
Yeah.
And it's only when we impose judgments on their behaviours that they become an issue. So I love the inner child.
Yeah, and it can be really emotional. It can be, you know, so emotional. I mean, I've got a little, you know, rebel teenager inside me that gets me into all sorts of trouble sometimes. And you know, humans are so complex. We are so complex. We're such complex people with so many different layers and things that have gone into making us who we are. And sometimes we're on a path, and I mean, you know, most people perhaps listening to this podcast have already done a lot of work around actually what does it mean to be most authentically myself, and you know, have made lane changes accordingly. But I think one of the things that when it comes to change is hard, but it's like learning a new language. And so, you know, you were talking about positive affirmations before. And interestingly, I'm about to start reading a book called The Biology of Belief, which actually talks about how the things that we actually say change us on a cellular level. It's a really interesting thing. So actually, maybe positive affirmations do help, even if it feels like you're kind of faking it to begin with. But maybe I'll come back and do another podcast on that when I've actually read the book. But there's something around just making small changes that can lead to that kind of serotonin boost of a completed task of, you know, I'm going to go and read this book, I'm going to go and paint my nails, and then you because you've accomplished something, that leads to that kind of happy feeling that you've accomplished it. What are you going to say?
I was going to say I'll put a slight twist on that. It isn't that I don't think positive affirmations don't work. What I would say is that in and of themselves, there's more to it. It's about the change. So, and I'm the last one to start talking about this, but you know, doing things that make us feel good to start with are really important. And if we had a hierarchy of needs, just because something seems trivial and unimportant doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't do it. If it makes us feel good, we'll get the other stuff done. But doing the good stuff to start with. And I think you know, as a person-centred counsellor, you know, I always try to encourage people. Obviously, they come to me and yourself, you know, regarding gender identity. And if that's all we're going to focus on, we're never going to be happy, because transition and transition alone isn't the answer. The answer is I need to change my life.
Yeah.
I need to express myself within that life accordingly, and I need to be authentic within that life. So it's, you know, for me personally, you know, my transition started when I started college. It didn't start when I started being more open.
Yeah.
Because I realised that I didn't want to continue with the life that I had.
Yeah.
So it was a whole change, and people will, you know, sometimes think, yeah, you were lucky. Maybe I was, and luck does play a lot in it. But we've got to create our own luck. And I made a really major change. Going back to college for me was really the start of that whole clear out. And I had no plan. I didn't think, oh, I'll do that. It was just, that's where my transition started. Some people it starts with hormones, some people it starts with telling their partners or the parents or whoever.
Yeah.
But we've got to look at our life as a whole, and positive affirmations can be part of that.
Yeah.
You know, I can do this. There are people that have done this, and having the belief that it can happen.
And I'm well aware when we talk about this kind of stuff that privilege does play a part in it. It may, for some people listening, feel like, you know, it's easy for you to say, I'm never going to be able to change this situation that I'm in right now. I can't get a job. I can't move out. I'm stuck here with these family, people, whoever I'm living with that don't get me. And so I don't want to diminish, the situations that people are in. But change is hard, but it really can happen. And yeah, I think, I mean, I would never say to anyone the answer to all your problems is positive affirmations. But maybe even just so, if we think about our nervous system, our autonomic nervous system, and this is something that, you know, I'm just learning about in my own journey. if we think about even just saying to myself, my autonomic nervous system is balanced, and sometimes that really kind of resets if I'm feeling really anxious or kind of quite low and, demoralized. It could be something like, when I often notice it most when I say things like, oh, that's never gonna, or that's always gonna. If it's nevers and always, or shoulds or ought tos, those are the things that I'm listening out for and going, well, am I, if by holding that belief, so for example, it might be, yeah, my partner's never going to change. If I'm always holding that belief, am I giving them the space to change? If I'm saying, I don't know what might be a good sort of comparison, like, my circumstances, I'm never going to have enough money. I'm always going to be terrible with money. Do we set ourselves up with a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy? And so maybe just tweaking the things that we say. I have a therapist that challenges me on that all the time. If I say a statement, she might say to me, at the moment. It is at the moment. I'm like, oh, right, shut up.
I think there's a few things in there. As soon as you started talking, then one of the things I was thinking as well, you said about privilege, but I also think accepting our own limitations as well. Because part of the journey for anybody in life is accepting that, we can't change how tall we are. We can't change our biological makeup in many ways. We can enhance it and do, but if we can't get to that place of acceptance, then that we really are stuck. And of course, I would have loved to have been a 13, 14-year-old girl going through puberty. I can't change that. I just have to accept that I can't affect that anymore. But what I can affect is what's coming up. And you're right, you may be, I'm just thinking of a young person living in a very unwelcoming household during lockdown. It's not to think this will never change. It's to accept that, well, this is where I am now. If I want change, then these are the steps I've got to do to affect that change. If I want to get my own place, transition, or whatever that might be, go to university, then I need to concentrate on my education now, because that is still part of your transition. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
It's not just about now and never. It's about the future. That it will stay like that if we don't do anything to change it.
Yeah. I think there's a really good sort of analogy in there of you're not pretending that it's not rubbish at the moment. That acceptance of it's validating. It's validating where you are. It's that kind of empathy that you were talking about. You just want someone to go, yeah, it really is shit right now. So if you imagine, and coming back to the inner child again, if you imagine, a small child, they've fallen over, they've hurt their knee, they're crying, it's the end of the world. The last thing they want is someone to go, well, that doesn't look that bad. I mean, the last thing they need is someone to go, just get on with it. You want someone to go, oh, I'm really sorry you've fallen off your bike. Let me help you. And so there's almost a process to go through of acceptance and change, which is validation and acceptance of where it is at the moment, and kindness and compassion and love, and then a bit of, okay, dust yourself off now, let's get on with the bike ride again, or whatever it was you were doing. So there's a kind of an analogy there of actually that is kind of the process of change, the validation of where you're at, the acceptance of where you're at, and okay, what can we do now?
Would it be fair to say one of the biggest blocks to affecting change is the fear of getting it wrong?
Oh, yeah.
Did you when again we've gone down a rabbit hole of a push bike there, but a child falling off a push bike, and let's just say they've grazed the knee, and the adult thinks that's not bad. They're ignoring the humiliation that they fell off the bike, the shock that the body went through when one minute it was upright, the next minute it was over. It isn't about the degree of physical injury. It's about that stop, process, think about it, let's get back on the bike now and let's go on. And you're right, if somebody starts minimising what you've just gone through, it's missing all the other stuff.
Yes.
And I think that is a really good example about what stops people making changes as an adult. That they're frightened that they'll get it wrong, and because everybody will just tell you, well, you were stupid to try it in the first place. Yeah. When actually the stupid thing is to not try anything.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. That's such a huge part of it, isn't it? You sort of, and if you did grow up with messages of that invalidated your experience and invalidated your pain, then you have to minimize that to survive. So you've learned over the years that actually, don't try, because it's gonna be painful.
I'm conscious of the time. And like you say, we could talk. I think we could do a whole podcast on the inner child. I think we'll have to develop that one.
Yeah.
But I think the thing I'm taking away from it, and I don't want this to be seen as counselling is a answer to all your problems, because it isn't. It's very tough at times. But in this moment where we've got people, we're facing a future with things like Brexit and pandemics, and and it's very easy to get sucked into that. There's no that we can't see beyond the next few months or the next year. And I think what we're saying here is that we can look after ourselves through all of this. That if we can find that in a child, or we can find that hobby, or we can find the book and we can have a bath, or I don't know, simple things. Yeah. That if we have that never or can't kind of in our psyche, then that needs to be broken, because again, people that are transitioning at the moment, well, everything's restrictive. I must admit, one of the biggest things I'm struggling with at the moment, I can't go shopping. And I love shopping, not because I like spending money. I like being out where people are. That's very validating for me. How do I feel validated if I'm not socialising and mixing with people? But I can't go shopping, but I have to think, well, it isn't that I'm never going to go shopping again. And what can I do? And, as you know, we will have Zoom meetings, and we will socialise. I will find spaces. And I think it's really important that people do look for the glimmers of light. Yeah. Even if they're in a completely black space, don't stop looking for them glimmers of light, and just latch onto them, if only for a moment. Yeah. Feel good for a short period, and hopefully them periods will just get a little bit longer. Yeah. As time passes.
Absolutely, you sum that up really well. That's so important. Just the holding on to it. It won't be like this forever. Even if it feels like it will be, it won't be. And validating how you feel at the moment. I feel like this, and that's okay.
Thank you so much for listening. I really hope you've enjoyed our programme today. Please go ahead and subscribe to future episodes if you haven't done so already. If you or anyone else have been affected by any of the things that we've talked about in our podcast today, and you'd like to contact us, please visit our website Help Centre and contact us via there. We're very happy to accept ideas for future episodes and future guests, so let us know if there's anything specific you'd like us to cover. You can also visit our website GenderGP.com for a multitude of information about transgender health and wellbeing issues. You can follow us on social media. ID is @GenderGP, and you can sign up to our monthly newsletter. Full details can be found in our show notes on our podcast page. Thanks for listening, and see you soon.